Have you ever wanted to create a character in D&D that draws its inspiration from an old fairy tale? No? Fine. Then in that case, does it sound fun to you to maul your enemies as a bear while also getting help from two bear companions? Either way, you're going to enjoy this video. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for our favorite role-playing games. We theorycraft about them, we crunch numbers about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one potential way to build a character that is hopefully both really powerful but also really fun to play in game. So if you enjoy creating characters for your role-playing games almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name's Colby. Before we jump in, just a little heads up. I think I'm gonna do some Baldur's Gate 3 videos in the near future. For those who don't know, BG3 is a video game coming out, next week actually, as I'm recording this. Alright, so my favorite dudes, Kelly and Monty, put out their Ranger multiclass rankings video a few weeks ago. Check it out here if you haven't seen it yet. And it was just phenomenal, as is every video in this series, right? And as always, I wanted to do a video inspired by that video of theirs. And for me, this week, the thing that had me salivating the most throughout their entire video was when they said,
"Is there a play here for being a moon druid beastmaster? Double bear?"
So you love your bear so much you wanted to be like the bear.
Be the bear.
Be the bear. Be the bear, be with the bear, one with the bear.
And after thinking about it for a minute, I realized, we could go even better and do 3 bears. Come on, I have to do that. And so my path was laid out for me. The only thing that we're missing now is Goldilocks, right? Now, there are some concerns about trying to multiclass Druid and Ranger that I want to talk about up front here. First off, while at first glance it seems like a good fit for a Ranger to take Druid levels, I mean, both of them want wisdom, so it's not making you any more mad, right? Multiple ability score dependent. And even conceptually, both classes kind of like nature, they both love animals, etc. But the reality is, there's almost so much overlap between these two classes that sometimes it feels like, why wouldn't I just stick with one instead of trying to do both? Especially when it comes to spells. Also, it's true that, like Monty was saying, you kind of get into a place when you're multiclassing Druid and Ranger where you're feeling torn between wanting to level, in our case, our wild shape form, or level for this character that we're going to do, our summoned beast companion. And so it can almost feel suboptimal to split the difference. That said, after mapping everything out and crunching numbers, I think I've got a path here that's going to give us some nice consistent scaling on both of those things, as well as the optimal route for our third bear. But it will mean that though we're starting out as a Ranger here, there will be a brief period of time where we'll actually have more levels in Druid than we will in Ranger. I'm totally okay with that because, as I've often said, my goal with these Dungeon Dudes inspired builds isn't necessarily to stick to their rules of only taking one multi-class dip and being primarily the class that you started out as, etc., etc. I'm just drawing on them for inspiration and then trying to make the strongest version of what they've inspired me to create from there, right? And so, I proudly present D&D build number 144, the 3 Bears. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he created for this character concept. He does this every week. He's such a great artist. If you'd be interested in following him to see the other stuff that he does, or to potentially reach out to him to try and commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party potentially, I will put links in the video description as always on how to do so. Thanks, Randall. But first, a word from our sponsor for the video this week, Only Crits, and their currently in Kickstarter 5e compatible sourcebook, Guillman's Guide to Speed. So In case you don't know them, Only Crits is a fantastic company that has years of experience creating both custom, beautiful dice, as well as multiple 5e compatible material for players and DMs alike to enjoy. Their latest project, Guillman's Guide to Speed, at the time that I'm recording this video, the Kickstarter just launched today, and they have already hit their initial funding goal. I'm sure by the time the video comes out, they'll be well into stretch goals. It looks so fun and unique, and above all, fast. Think of GGTS as a reimagining of D&D, where your adventure is not taking place in a medieval-like Faerun, but instead is a Grand Prix set against a vibrant, arcane punk backdrop, turbocharged with magic. If that sounds fun to you, and how could it not, then check it out. With this book, players can design and build their very own adventuring or racing vehicles with a unique set of mechanics that codify engineering rules. Artificers of the world, rejoice. Of course, if you just want to jump in and start racing, there are over 30 pre-made vehicles included in the book, as well as racing rules. And yes, you race against monsters. Naturally. But there is more here than just racing. Over 40 new spells, over 50 new magic items, 4 new classes, 12 new subclasses, new races, new backgrounds, new feats, and a bunch of new monsters. So do yourself a favor and go back this project. Help them hit their next stretch goal and enjoy the extra goodies you get now if you back them in Kickstarter. When you do, please use the link that I'm going to put in the video description so that they know I sent you. And thank you. Big thanks to Only Crits. I cannot wait to see the finished product here. I know it's going to be fantastic. And let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1 for our starting class, we are going to start off as a ranger. So yes, when we first meet our champion, they are maybe a little bit of a wanderer. Someone who feels more at home in the wild places of the world than in the bustling city, I think. They are, of course, especially drawn to animals, and in particular, bears. Why is that? Were they raised by bears? Did they grow up in the circus, apprenticed to a bear trainer, or maybe upset at the way that bears were treated there, or like in a menagerie that they visited? Maybe you come from a shamanistic society and had like a coming-of-age experience where you went through a spiritual ritual and the spirit of the bear claimed you as its own. I'm not sure, but I would strongly encourage you to figure it out. As for our starting race, yes, I'm going to go back to my old favorite here, custom lineage this week, not so much because we need a free feat, as because I want to start out with an 18 wisdom, and this is really the only way to do it unless we're rolling for stats and get lucky, of course. The reality is that as a character who will consistently be fighting in wild shape form, our physical ability scores don't matter as much as they do for most characters, right? But our wisdom score will impact both our spellcasting and the damage from our other bears. So I want to make sure that we can get that wisdom as high as we possibly can, as quickly as we can, especially since thanks to multiclassing, it's going to be a minute before we get our first ability score increase or feat. Now, as for the free feat that we get as a custom lineage character, I actually don't think it matters too much so long as it's a half feat that will let us take a +1 to our wisdom. My favorite of all the options, and the one that I would most strongly suggest, would be Fey Touched. This feat is just so good. In addition to letting us bump our wisdom here by 1, it lets us learn the Misty Step spell, a 2nd level spell that rangers and most druids never get access to. And I mean, teleportation is always good to have on any character, right? But then Fey Touched also lets us learn another 1st level spell from the enchantment or divination schools, and that means we could take really cool stuff that we also wouldn't otherwise get access to, like, say, the Bless spell, or the one I'd probably take, Silvery Barbs, so long as the Silvery Barbs mob wasn't prowling about. As for our ability scores, I assume that we're going the point buy method as always and suggest that we take a 15 wisdom and then +2 from custom lineage, +1 from Fey Touched there, so we start with an 18, and then a 14 dexterity and a 14 constitution. I'm tempted to buff our mental abilities a little bit more since, like I said, we're planning on being wild shaped in combat, but we do need at least a 13 in dexterity to multiclass out of ranger, right? And dexterity is an important saving throw, plus benefits a lot lot of important skills and our initiative, so that's always a good one to have. And then with Constitution, having more health will be important, especially when we get knocked out of wild shape, which will undoubtedly happen from time to time. And we're going to want to do what we can to protect our concentration too. So I think this is the best way to go with our stats. As for our starting equipment, I'm going to recommend that we go the gold buy route as I usually do here and say make sure to grab some scale mail and a heavy crossbow. This will let us get through those first few levels, though we won't be amazing with our mediocre 14 dexterity. We will have something to help us out there soon, however. And maybe I'll just mention this now as far as armor goes. Yes, we're told that druids will not wear metal armor. A lot of you, in fact, would argue that will not does not mean cannot. I don't want to get into that debate here. Just know that this is definitely something that you should think about and talk with your DM about. Will you be okay to wear metal armor on your druid? If not, then obviously once we start taking druid levels, we're going to want to find like some hide armor instead, or ideally like some dragon scale, or maybe you've got a homebrew ironwood armor, something like that, right? It's not going to matter too much since ultimately, like I've said, we're planning on being wild shaped in combat, which means most of the time we're going to have the armor class of our beast, and the armor will be irrelevant until we get knocked out of our wild shape, of course, in which case, yeah, you'll want to have as good an AC as you can. As a Ranger 1, then, first up, we get the Deft Explorer feature, which was introduced with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And by the way, all of the optional features that Rangers got from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, I'm going to just assume that we're taking here, as I think they're pretty much all better across the board when compared to the Player's Handbook Ranger options. Deft Explorer at this level gives us Canny, which essentially gives us expertise in one skill that we're proficient in, letting us double our proficiency bonus for that skill. On this character, I want to take Athletics, and that's actually pretty important for the build, so make sure you grab Athletics obviously as one of your proficiencies at character creation, but I'm going to explain why this is so important for us a little bit later. We also get Favored Foe at Ranger 1, which is pretty weak, but better than the alternative, Favored Enemy, in my opinion. Favored Foe lets us mark an enemy proficiency bonus times per day, and then says that we can do an extra d4 of damage to that enemy once on our turn when we deal damage to them. The kicker is that it requires our concentration, so yeah, not something that I'd plan on using unless I were out of spell slots or wanting to preserve my spell slots for some reason. At level 2, we get a fighting style, and I think I'd probably take archery here, even though we won't actually be getting a lot of use out of it during most of our combat encounters. Still, it gives us a +2 to hit with ranged weapons, making our mediocre dexterity not hurt quite so bad when we are engaging in combat before we can wild shape, or later when we're out of wild shape uses, I suppose. Of course, you could go Druidic Warrior instead here to get a couple of Druid cantrips and then take Shillelagh and use like a quarterstaff and then your Wisdom modifier for your +2 hit and damage, right? But we're going to be taking Druid levels soon and can grab Shillelagh then, so I think I'd just as soon have our backup plan be using ranged weapons, personally, especially since we're unlikely to have a very good armor class. Attacking from ranged feels like a good idea. Of course, you could forgo either, hoping to just always be in wild shape and take maybe like blind fighting instead, if you wanted. I'll assume that we're going archery. We also get first level ranger spells at this level, and there are a lot of good ones to choose from. Hunter's Mark to add a d6 of damage on our weapon attacks, Entangle to potentially restrain our enemies, Absorb Elements for a nice defensive reaction to have resistance to elemental damage, and of course, Cure Wounds and Goodberry for some nice support and utility options. I'm not going to plan on using any of these in combat, at least not by the time that we get to our first damage report, so go ahead and pick your favorites here, PYF, and I'll also add that with the exception of a single spell that we're going to get to later, I think I'd plan on focusing on support and utility with my spellcasting here on this character. Rangers, and especially druids, make really pretty fantastic support characters, and sure, though you can't cast spells while wild-shaped, it doesn't mean you can't make a fantastic support and utility-focused character outside of combat, or inside of combat in a pinch, of course, whether that means dropping your wild shape to, like, emergency heal, or, I suppose, taking more of a support role in combat when you don't have any wild shape uses left. And I love having that variety and diversity in the way that I can play my character, so That's great. At level 3, we get our Ranger archetype, our Ranger subclass, and we are going with, yes, the Beastmaster. Now, interestingly, I think, even though Beastmaster might be like the most quintessential Ranger archetype, I mean, I think when most of us think about a Ranger character in a role-playing game, we probably imagine someone running around with an animal companion, right? But yeah, despite that, I've actually almost never used Beastmaster in a build. I mean, there's the actual Beastmaster build I did way back in the day, and then there was like the Pokemon Trainer, which was a lot of fun, and I think that's pretty much it. And both of those builds came out like over 2 years ago. I have been neglecting the Beastmaster. Time to rectify that. So since it's been forever since I've used them, let's actually read the little flavor text that Wizards of the Coast wrote about Beastmasters. The Beastmaster archetype embodies a friendship between the civilized races and the beasts of the wild. United in focus, beasts and Ranger fight the monsters that threaten civilization and the wilderness alike. Okay, fine. Maybe not the most inspiring of subclass descriptions, but I can appreciate straightforward and to the point. As a Beastmaster, though, we get our animal companion, and we, naturally, will be using the Primal Companion feature that was, yes, introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. That is a massive improvement over the player's handbook, Ranger's Companion feature. With the Primal Companion, we magically summon a medium-sized beast that can be from one of 3 stat blocks: a beast of the sea, air, or land. Whichever one we choose, we are, importantly for me, told that we determine the kind of animal the beast is. And so for us, of course, the beast is a beast of the land, and it is a bear. Thus, bear numero uno. Now, this bear is going to scale based on our proficiency bonus and our Ranger level. We can command them to take an action by using our bonus action, which is great, and they can, among other things, make a maul attack for 1d8 plus 2 plus our proficiency bonus in damage, or they can charge. With charge, they have to move 20 feet in a straight line and then make a maul attack. But if they hit, they'll do an extra d6 of damage, and the enemy has to make a strength save against our wisdom-based spell DC, nice, or be knocked prone. That's pretty awesome, and I'm actually going to assume that our companion is doing this every turn. It won't always be advisable, I know, since it might mean that they incur an attack of opportunity, right? But I'm planning on trying to keep this enemy that we're attacking prone, which will give them disadvantage on their attacks and give those of us within 5 feet of them advantage on our attacks as well. So that should help us pull this off a little more safely with some consistency. And I mean, our companion does have 40 feet of move speed, which means that technically they could back up 20 feet and charge 20 feet every turn if they wanted to. At the very least, I am going to assume that we're doing this on round 2, which will be super important. I'll discuss more when we get to our first damage report. We also get Primal Awareness here at Ranger 2, which basically just gives us the Speak with Animal spell for free and lets us cast it once per day without spending a spell slot. Nice little bit of utility. But at level 4, if we want to have all 3 of our bears going by level 6, our first damage report, we've got to start taking Druid levels here. And doing this before we get to like Ranger level 5 and thus extra attack won't actually be as painful for us as for most melee characters, right? Which makes me happy. As a Druid 1, then, we get Druidic, which is the secret language that Druids use to leave messages for each other in the wilds. And then we get Druid spells. And like I said at the beginning, there is a lot of overlap between Ranger and Druid spells, so I'll try to highlight the good ones here that are different. First up, we can get cantrips, so yeah, grab Guidance for a nice additional d4 on skill checks for you or a party member. And then Shillelagh if you'd rather use Wisdom for a melee attack instead of your Dexterity for a ranged attack when you're not in wild shape form, right? Like we said. As for first level spells, just be sure to grab Healing Word, which is just a little easier to use than Cure Wounds in combat since you can cast it with a bonus action and from range. And then Fairy Fire, which is a nice concentration-based spell to potentially give you and your allies advantage on enemies who fail their Dexterity saving throw against it. And we've got plans for our concentration otherwise, but this might be nice to pull out when we are out of 2nd level or higher spell slots anyways. At level 5, we would be a Druid 2, and that means we get Wild Shape. Alright, here we go. Now, Most druids can wild shape as an action into a beast with a 1/4 challenge rating or lower. They can do this twice per short rest and can stay in wild shape form for a number of hours equal to half their druid level rounded down. The beast that they transform into can't have a swimming speed until druid level 4, nor a flying speed until druid level 8, which we're not actually going to get to on this build. But when wild shaped, you take the strength, constitution, and dexterity of the beast, keeping your own intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores. You can't talk, you can't cast spells, though you can concentrate on ones that you've already cast, and you assume the beast's hit points, though when those expire, you revert back to your humanoid form with any damage that knocked you out of wild shape carrying over to damage your humanoid self. Also, importantly, you get to use whoever has the better saving throw and skill bonus between your humanoid form and your beast form, right? And you pick up any skill proficiencies that the beast has, as well as keeping your own. Now, one thing that we can use our wild shape for, however, is to cast the Find Familiar spell. And you know what? We are totally doing this because it would let us summon, say, like a yellow, tawny barn owl that we would 100% name Goldilocks. Yes! And I mean, also, that familiar could give us some nice scouting utility and even take the help action to give advantage on an attack. I love it. But then yes, druids also at this level get their druid circle, their druid subclass, and of course, we are going with Circle of the Moon, which is pretty much imperative here for what we want to do. Because as a moon druid, we get, well, first off, Combat Wild Shape, which lets us wild shape as a bonus action if we want to, instead of an action, which is nice. And we can even use a bonus action while wild shaped to expend a spell slot to heal ourselves for a d8 per spell level spent. And yeah, I do think that we'll be doing this fairly frequently on this character because remaining in wild shape will be important for us. Though doing so will mean, using a bonus action and thus sacrificing our primal companion's attack when we do so, but still, a good idea when we need it. Most importantly, of course, moon druids get circle forms, which means that we can transform into a beast of challenge rating 1 or lower. And you know what beast has a challenge rating of 1? That's right, the brown bear. Brown bears are awesome. They are large-sized, which is actually kind of important. They can multi-attack, once with their claws, once with their maws. Jaws? I can only think of words that rhyme with maws. Teeth. Anyway, at a +6 to hit for both of those, a d8 +4 or 2d6 +4 in damage, respectively. And thus, bear number 2. Yeah, we love our pet bear so much that we just want to become one ourselves. And so now we've got Papa Bear and Mama Bear. All we need is baby. And we're going to get that at the very next level, because at level 6, we would be a Druid 3, and that means second level Druid spells. And while yes, Lesser Restoration and Pass Without Trace are fantastic for utility and support, among others, and there are great concentration damage-based spells like Spike Growth and Moonbeam available, we need Baby Bear. So we are taking Summon Beast. Summon Beast takes an action to cast and requires concentration, though it lasts for an hour, which is great. Casting it allows us to summon a bestial spirit of either the land, air, or water, just like Primal Companion, right? And we are told that what we summon resembles a small-sized animal of our choice that is native to the chosen environment. And thus, voila, Baby Bear. We got a large bear, a medium bear, and a small bear. 3 bears. And Goldilocks the owl. I could die a happy man. And now, this baby bear actually packs a pretty mean punch. As a land beast, they get pack tactics, first of all, which means they have advantage on their attacks so long as one of their allies is within 5 feet of the enemy that they're attacking. And of course, we would never be far from our baby bear, so that should be easy. They also get to attack a number of times equal to half the spell level that we cast it at, right? So not until we get to 4th level spell slots will they be attacking more than once per turn. But when they do, they use our spell attack modifier to hit again, awesome, and then do a 1d8 +4 plus the spell's level in damage, which means they hit ever so slightly harder than Mama Bear at this point. Ferocious little bear cub. And so cute. Alright, so at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. Let's talk about what combat is going to look like for us here. Now, we can be in wild shape for an hour at this point, and our baby bear lasts for an hour too. Mama Bear, our primal companion, lasts indefinitely, or at least until they're killed, at which point we can just resummon them with a 1st level spell, right? So it is very possible that when combat breaks out, all 3 bears will be in play. If not, take that first round to cast Summon Beast with your action and then Wild Shape as a bonus action, yeah? Once that's done though, the first thing that you'll want to do is use your bonus action to have Mama Bear make a charge attack and try to knock the enemy prone. Use Goldilocks to give advantage on that charge attack because landing it is super important. Now once that's done, you, Papa Bear, are going to run up and grapple them. Now, you don't have to do this. You could just make your multi-attack instead. But doing so is fantastic because yes, if they're grappled, they have a move speed of 0. And if they're prone and grappled, right, they can't use their move speed to stand up, which means they will remain prone, which means that all 3 bears will have advantage on all attacks that they make against that enemy. And yes, this is the reason that we took Canny or expertise in athletics, right? Because while wild-shaped, we still retain the benefit of any features from our class, race, or other source, and can use them so long as the new form is physically capable of doing so. So the way it should work is this. Your strength score here changes to a 19 as a bear, right, or +4. We'd then double our proficiency bonus that we get from having Canny in athletics, so +6 more at this level, giving us a total of +10 to our athletics checks. And since grappling is an athletics check, we should very rarely fail to grapple here. Oh, and importantly, don't forget that our Papa Bear is large-sized, meaning we could grapple even huge creatures, which is great. Now, just in case some of you are questioning whether we could actually have a +10 to our athletics checks here, here's a quote from Jeremy Crawford in a Sage Advice Dragon Talk video from a few years back, speaking about Wild Shape and how it interacts with skills and proficiencies. Use your proficiency bonus for anything where you are both proficient, but only if yours is higher. But you use the physical stats of the beast. Thanks to Canny, our proficiency bonus in athletics is higher than the bears. They're not actually even proficient in athletics. But regardless, we use their physical stats. Capiche? Anyway, at this point, our bonus action will be used for an attack from Mama Bear, and Baby Bear gets to attack without us spending any additional resources to direct them, which is awesome. And of course, once we've got our enemy grappled, on subsequent rounds, we'd just be making our multi-attack against them in bear form. I guess I'll mention, this means you might not be making all of your potential 3 bears attacks until round 3, right? So if combat breaks out and you don't have your Baby Bear summoned and you're not in wild shape, I'd probably skip the grappling personally, because that's just too much setup. But otherwise, if all 3 bears are in play when combat breaks out, you'll be going all in right on round 2. So I'm going to assume that yes, we're making 2 Papa Bear attacks, 1 Mama Bear charge attack, and 1 Baby Bear maul attack on our turn, all made with advantage because I like to look at best case scenarios, as you probably know. But under those assumptions, against an enemy with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 45 damage per round. And against an enemy with a 15 AC, it would be 39 DPR. And you know what? Compared to other sustained DPR builds that I've done to date, check the video description for links on those comparisons and graphs and spreadsheets, that's like upper half of tier 1 at this level. Go 3 bears! And hey, we are tanky and we bring some pretty fantastic healing and utility outside of combat especially, and that is all just going to get better too. Unfortunately, our Papa Bear attacks are not going to get all that much better. I talked about this in the Nova Moon build I did a few weeks ago, right? The problem with Moon Druids is that they scale so poorly. Getting to Brown Bear at level 2 is amazing. After that, the mechanical increase that we get from being able to transform into a higher CR beast is fairly paltry. For that reason, you might think that we'd just want to leave Druid behind here and go back to Ranger, right? Alas, I think not. For a couple of reasons. One, sure, even though getting to a CR2 bear doesn't give a huge bump to our damage, it's a bump nonetheless, as well as a bump to our tankiness. We get a bump to our armor class, a few more hit points, and we'd also get an increase to our grapple checks, which is pretty important if we want to maintain advantage. And I mean, I haven't even talked about this yet, but of course, keeping an enemy grappled and prone is doing more than just giving us advantage on our attacks, right? It's also a great way to control on the battlefield, letting us help keep our allies safer. So it's really a great tactic to use in combat, and I want to do my best to keep up my ability to successfully bear grapple my foes. What's more, the thing that's actually going to scale better than anything else that we do on this character, kind of sadly, actually, in my opinion, is Baby Bear. Remember, they get to attack a number of times equal to half the spell level that we summon them at, plus do more damage for each additional spell level. Papa and Mama don't scale like that, though Mama will get some nice scaling eventually. It's kind of a long ways off from where we're at. So for both of those reasons, I think the best thing for us to do right now is to stick with Druid for a bit. Thus, at level 7, we would be a Druid 4, and that means our first ability score increase or feat. Naturally, we will want to bump our wisdom here, taking it to the cap of 20, which increases not only our wisdom saves, our spells, but yeah, even our Mama and Baby Bear attacks. We also get 3rd level spell slots now, thanks to multiclassing, which would give us a tiny bump to damage from Baby Bear also. Don't forget that we can now also wild shape into a creature with a swim speed, though for me, for this character, I can't imagine ever doing so, except for utility purposes, like if we just need to get across a body of water really quickly, etc. At level 8, we would be a Druid 5, and that means we get 3rd level Druid spells. There are a lot of fantastic options here. Revivify, so we can resurrect a dead ally in a pinch. Dispel magic is always handy. Plant Growth can bring some fantastic control, Sleet Storm for some control and damage, and yeah, fine, Conjure Animals is broken and dumb and does a ton of damage depending on how your DM runs it at your table. But yes, I'm just going to assume that we're sticking with Baby Bear for our concentration here, so go ahead and PYF. At level 9, we would be a Druid 6, and that means we get Primal Strike as a Moon Druid. This tells us that our wild shape attacks are now considered magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance to non-magical attacks. That's nice, but I'm really hoping and praying that your DM will let you have like an insignia of claws magic item or something like it on this character to help you do a little more damage while wild shaped, and that would make our attacks magical anyways. Hopefully even it's like a homebrewed magic item that will scale as you gain levels. Without something like that, our Mama Bear and Baby Bear chance to hit will always be higher than our own. And that just feels a little off to me. Not for like male dominance reasons. Please don't ascribe anything to me calling these like Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear. You be the Mama Bear if you want, and have your primal companion be the Papa Bear. I don't care. It just seems odd that a summoned beast's hit chance would always be higher than the character who's summoning them. Wizards really needs to fix Moon Druid scaling. Here's hoping that they do so for 1D&D. Anyway, speaking of Moon Druid scaling, we also can, yes, now at Moon Druid 6, transform into a challenge rating 2 beast or lower. And yes, for us, that will mean a cave or polar bear, naturally, which are statistically identical. The only significant difference between a cave bear and a brown bear is 8 more hit points, 1 more armor class, and 1 more strength, which will, increase our athletics checks, hit chance, and damage by 1 each. Not a big bump, but we'll take it. More importantly for us at this level, at least for our damage, we now have 4th level spell slots thanks to multiclassing, which means Baby Bear not only hits a little harder, but can attack twice per turn. Sweet. For our level 9 damage report then, we have now increased our wisdom modifier for a better hit chance on our summoned bears, given ourselves the slightly stronger cave bear form, and given Baby Bear a big bump by upcasting so they can attack twice per turn for a little more damage each time. And thus, against an enemy here with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 63 damage per round, and against an enemy with a 16 AC, it would be 56 DPR. And that's a solid 50% increase, give or take, landing us kind of in the middle of tier 1 still compared to other sustained damage builds that I've done to date at this level. All right. We have managed to continue scaling nicely despite some challenges in being able to do so, typically, had we just stuck with a straight class for either Ranger or Moon Druid, right? I like it. Let's keep going. So, at level 10, now that we've kind of hit peak bear when it comes to Papa Bear capabilities at least, and we got to 4th level spells for a big Baby Bear bump, I think it's time to go back to Ranger for some Mama Bear love. Don't take that where it shouldn't go. That actually makes me think of my friend Jesse Jerdak. You guys know Jesse? DM, mini painter, and Mama Bear extraordinaire. Such a great guy. I hope he sees this. Anyway, this would mean that we are a Ranger 4 and that we get another ability score increase or feat. Now, we've capped out on Wisdom, so we could bump like Dexterity for better initiative, maybe ranged attacks when we're out of Wild Shape, but I think at this point, when I get knocked out of Wild Shape with a 20 Wisdom, I just as soon stick with either Shillelagh attacks or taking a support role in those situations. And so instead, I think here I'd want to take Resilient Constitution. The reality is this. Our baby bear, like I've said, does more damage right now than either we do or our primal companion. So maintaining concentration is of utmost import. And we don't have Constitution saving throw proficiency, right? Thus, a fairly paltry concentration check. Let's get it with this feat so that we are more likely to keep baby bear around. Yeah. At level 11, we would be a Ranger 5, and that means we get extra attack. And even though we can't both multi-attack in bear form and use extra attack, we have to choose one or the other, right? Since taking the multi-attack action is very much not the same thing as taking the attack action. And in order to benefit from extra attack, we need to take the attack action, right? However, extra attack will still be handy sometimes, I think. See, our mama bear isn't going to succeed in knocking our enemy prone every single time. And in those instances, with extra attack, we'll be able to grapple and shove on the same turn in bear form, knocking them prone anyways, because both grappling and shoving are things we do with the attack action, right? With each one just replacing one of our attacks. And keeping an enemy grappled and prone is really super important for this build. So I'm happy to have the ability to do that a little more reliably now. We also get second level ranger spells here, and the only one that I'm going to mention here that I'd really want that druids don't get access to, somewhat surprisingly for me, is Aid. This is a great little support spell, healing up to 3 of your party members by 5 and also raising their maximum hit points by 5. And it lasts for 8 hours and doesn't require concentration. Very nice. Don't forget also that, thanks to our Ranger's Primal Awareness feature, we now get the Beast Sense spell for free, which lets us see and hear through a beast similar to how we can warg into our familiar, right? It'll be a nice spell to have when Goldilocks isn't around for whatever reason. Probably because she's fast asleep in Baby Bear's bed. At level 12, we would be a Ranger 6, and that means we get another addition to our Deft Explorer feature. This time it's roving, which simply gives us an extra 5 feet of move speed, always handy, and a climbing and swimming speed equal to our walking speed. Not always necessary or useful, but fantastic when you need it. Favored Foe also gets an increase here from a D4 once per turn on something we almost never use to a D6. Sad bear. We do get 5th level spell slots now though, which is nice, giving us a tiny bump to our baby bear's damage, and I mean, hey, more and better spell slots. Always good. At level 13, we would be a Ranger 7, and that means as a Beastmaster we get exceptional training. This lets us use our bonus action to command our mama bear to dash, disengage, or take the help action if they don't attack. This is weird. I mean, in the player's handbook version of the Beastmaster, it was somewhat useful because you had to actually sacrifice one of your own attacks to get your pet to do stuff. But since Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you already only have to use your bonus action to have your primal companion do something. And it's not restricted to the things that are in its stat block, right? So it could have done those things with a bonus action anyway. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't update this for the primal companion with Tasha's. Oh well. Importantly, we are also told that our companion's attacks are now considered magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance to non-magical attacks, so it's still a good feature to get to. Alright, time for our level 13 damage report. And since last check, we actually haven't seen a lot of increases to our damage, unfortunately. We've gotten a whole host of nice defensive, utility, and support increases, and some quality of life improvements. But the only real bumps to the raw damage are coming from an increase to our proficiency bonus and a little more damage for Baby Bear if we summon them with a 5th level spell slot. And so against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average here do 66 DPR, and against an enemy with a 17 armor class, it would be a 58 damage per round. There's the lack of scaling that we've been anticipating. So yeah, compared to other sustained DPR builds that I've done to date at this level, we're now more like bottom half of tier 2. Admittedly, we could have gotten a little more damage at this level had we just stuck with Druid and scaled our spell slots more quickly to get to 6th level spell slots and then 3 attacks per turn from Baby Bear, but I feel like going that route would leave our Mama Bear more squishy than we want her at these levels. Plus, we'd miss out on some important buffs to her, like making her attacks magical, right? Not to mention that going back to Ranger is going to be better for our damage eventually. And the whole point of this build was to build a Ranger that went with some Druid levels and not the other way around. Plus, going Ranger has given us some spell scaling and some nice defensive and utility and support functionality like I've talked about. But yeah, as far as our damage goes, levels 9 through 13 are sort of the winter of our discontent. That's okay. It's about to get a nice bump. At level 14, we would be a Ranger 8, and that means another ability score increase or feat. And since we took Resilient Constitution last time, giving us an uneven Constitution score, right? It raised our con by 1. I don't think I even mentioned that. I think I'd actually be looking here to take another half feat that lets us bump our Constitution. And for me, that would be Chef. Chef is just a fun, support-focused feat that lets us add to the healing that our companions receive during a short rest, similar to the Bard's Song of Rest. It's a 1d8, but not because we are singing them a soothing ballad. No, we are cooking them some delicious food. And you better believe that for me, for this build, that's going to be a nice bowl of porridge. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. But, of course, the best part about Chef is the treats. Right, so after a long rest, you can now make everyone some little treats. Probably like gingerbread cookies in the shape of a bear, maybe? Anyway, you can give them to your friends, or to your other bears for that matter, and then when they eat them, with a bonus action, they get temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. It's just so wholesome. I love it. And yeah, these could totally just be like bear Scooby snacks, and you could feed them to yourself and to Mama Bear and to Papa Bear, increasing the survivability of your 3 bears. Not a bad idea. We also, at this level, get Land's Stride, which tells us that moving through non-magical difficult terrain doesn't slow us down. We can pass through non-magical plants without being slowed by or taking damage from them, like if they have thorns or whatever, and that we have advantage on saves against magical plants meant to impede our movement, like entangle or spike growth, etc. Okay, sure. I mean, it's not amazing, but a lot of classes don't get anything other than an ability score increase or feat at level 8, so I'm not going to complain about a feature that gives some occasional usefulness. At level 15, we would be a Ranger 9, and that means we get 3rd level Ranger spells. And like I said earlier, there's just a ton of overlap between Druid and Ranger spells, and it might be more apparent with 3rd level spells than anywhere. I might say Conjure Barrage could be worth looking at. It's not great, but it does give us an okay area of effect damage option that's probably better than anything else that we've got access to here for those purposes. Otherwise, go ahead and pick your favorites, focusing, like I've said, I think on utility and support, so things like Daylight, Water Breathing, etc. Speaking of utility spells, our Primal Awareness feature does give us Speak with Plants at this level, and as always, lets us cast it once a day for free without spending a spell slot. I hope you find some really interesting plants to speak to with it. At level 16, we would be a Ranger 10, and that means we get Nature's Veil, which is really pretty great. It tells us that proficiency bonus times per day, as a bonus action, we can just make ourselves invisible until the start of our next turn. Unlike with the invisibility spell, this invisibility doesn't require a concentration, doesn't break when we attack or cast a spell, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't do this while wild shape, since doing so isn't casting a spell, right? So yeah, we could totally be an invisible bear and then make attacks with advantage if we wanted, as well as give enemies disadvantage on their attacks to hit us, which is great. Of course, since it requires a bonus action to use, it would keep us from making Mama Bear attacks. And I am kind of already assuming that we've got advantage thanks to a prone and grappled enemy. But there will absolutely be times when this will be handy and useful, whether you're in bear form or humanoid form, so enjoy it. Adept Explorer also gives us another feature here, Tireless, which gives us temporary hit points equal to 1d8 plus our wisdom modifier. Nice. It costs an action to do this, and we can only do it proficiency bonus times per day, but there's no limit to how long those temporary hit points last, so not a bad thing to use outside of combat especially. And again, no reason why we couldn't do it while wild shaped. So give one of those bear Scooby snacks to somebody else. Oh, it also lets us reduce our exhaustion level by 1 with just a short rest instead of a long rest like it typically does, just in case you were thinking about multiclassing into Berserker Barbarian or something. Most importantly, at this level we finally get 6th level spell slots thanks to multiclassing, which means that we can now have Baby Bear making 3 attacks per turn if we were to upcast Summon Beast at the 6th level, and that is just awesome. But then finally, for us, at level 17, we would be a Ranger 11, and we get Bestial Fury as a Beastmaster, and this is the feature that I really wanted to make sure we got to before we ended the build, because it simply tells us that when we command our Mama Bear to take the attack action, she can make 2 attacks instead of 1, and that's just fantastic. And so, for our final level 17 damage report, we've seen some nice increases since last check. Mostly due to the fact that both our Baby Bear and our Mama Bear have gained 1 attack per turn each. Baby Bear now has 3 and Mama Bear now has 2. And yeah, like I've said, both Mama and Baby are absolutely outshining Papa Bear at this point damage-wise. And that means that between the 3 bears, we are potentially getting 7 attacks on our turn. That's awesome. And yes, as always, we have also continued to pick up some really nice utility, defensive, and support features as well. But against enemies here with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 97 damage per round, and against an 18 AC, it would be 86 DPR. Dang it, we almost broke that century mark. Of course, these are averages, so you will do over 100 DPR fairly consistently here if everything goes according to plan anyways, and that's so cool. And yeah, compared to other sustained DPR builds that I've done to date, at this level, we're kind of in like the middle of tier 2. And again, if you consider all the tankiness, support, and utility that we bring with us, in addition to all that damage, that is a really fantastic place to be. So, okay, let's bring it on home with some final thoughts. The tier score for this build, if you take the damage that they do at all of the armor classes that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports, and just average it all into one big number, we end up with a 55. And that puts us, yeah, right in the middle of tier 2, between the Shadow Blade, that Blade Singer with Twilight Cleric levels, and the Eldritch Blade Master. Both of those videos, I think, are in like my top 10 of all time for most views. And neither of them, I will add, had as effective a combination of support, tankiness, and utility that this build brings. So yeah, I really love where we ended up with this character. I mean, first off, from a fun and funny and adorable character concept perspective, it is just top-notch, in my opinion. But the build also just ended up super well-rounded and really potent in combat. High marks on all points. The one thing that leaves me with kind of a bad taste in my mouth, I guess, is, yeah, the way that our character, our own Papa Bear self, just really doesn't scale past character 9, right? Once we hit Druid level 6. The real sweet spot for this character is like levels 6 through 9, I think. And you know what? Since most campaigns end at around level 10 or 11, that's great. And they do continue to get some nice scaling in the late game as well. And you know, to be fair, poor scaling for your player character is a complaint that you could make about all Moon Druids, really. And I have. So yeah, the fact that our overall damage did continue to increase, eventually at least, makes me super happy with where we ended up. Now, the question, as always with these Dungeon Dudes inspired videos, of course, is this combo stronger than going full Druid or full Ranger? I think so. I mean, sure, you give up some support and utility by passing on those higher level Druid spells, but we still ended up with plenty of support and utility. And I don't think a straight Ranger is better by really any measuring stick. More importantly, neither of them could really pretend to be Goldilocks and the 3 Bears if they were just going straight class. So yeah, this is unquestionably better than either class by itself. So that's the build for the week. I had so much fun with this, as I'm sure you guys could tell. I hope I get to play it at least in a one-shot sometime, but I hope you enjoyed it, more importantly. And I hope you know that I love you guys. You are so awesome. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for this channel. Thank you for watching and liking and subscribing and commenting and clicking on the notifications bell. That's big. And bigger than all of that is considering joining as a channel member if you really want to lend some financial support to the channel. But even if you don't, I still love you. And I hope you have a great day and a fantastic week. And if you don't, I hope you'll hang in there. You've got this. But I hope that you'll be good and kind and that I see you again really soon. But until then, eat your own porridge and sit in your own chairs and sleep in your own bed. And take care. Bye-bye. I don't know. If it's a ranger druid build, we gotta go green for the background, right? We got to. Angel, answer me. Are you near if rain should fall? Am I to believe you will rise to calm the storm? For so great a treasure words will never do. Surely, if this is, promises are mine to give you, mine to give. Nothing gets me in the mood for D&D more than Enya. Just makes me want to be like, I don't know, on some misty lake in a forest or something, exploring some unknown but beautiful location, probably filled with elves and fae. Enya also makes for great lullabies for those of you with small children if you're trying to get them to sleep. All right, hair's a little wet, but meh. I cannot wait for it to dry. I need to start recording now. The Chat Noir says so. So long as the Silvery Bobs mob... So long as the Silvery Bobs... So don't even say any of that. And given Baby Bear a big dump. Baby Bear's always dumping on my stuff. And given Baby Bear a big bump